following sessions, which I now have the great pleasure of introducing, is titled United in Recovery Towards a Free and Prosperous Ukraine. My name is Ali Aslan. I'm an international TV host and journalist, and I have the great pleasure of moderating this upcoming session. First up, as the speakers, you see we have added a few chairs and we have more speakers on this particular panel than on the subsequent ones. So without further ado, allow me to introduce our distinguished panelists. First up, she's the German Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development. Delighted to welcome to the stage. Please welcome Svenja Schulze, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, Minister Schulze. Great to have you with us. I believe you are right here. Next up, she is Ukraine's first Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Economic Development and Trade. Please welcome Yulia Sviridenko, ladies and gentlemen. Vice Prime Minister, great to have you with us. Please, have a seat right here. Right here, okay. Yes, thank you so much. Next up, he's going to speak on behalf of the United Nations. He's the administrator of the UNDP. Great to have him here on stage. Please welcome Achim Steiner, ladies and gentlemen. Nehmen Sie hier Platz, bitte. Also delighted to welcome to the stage the President of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Please welcome Odile Renaud-Bassot, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the World Bank Group, it is my great pleasure to welcome the World Bank's Managing Director for Operations. Please welcome Anna Bierde, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, we've been talking so much about Ukraine from the get-go. So I'm very, very delighted to welcome two mayors of prominent Ukrainian cities that have suffered the brunt of what has been happening since 2022. First up, he's the mayor of the second largest Ukrainian city, Kharkiv. Please welcome Ihor Terekov, ladies and gentlemen. All the way in the back. Yeah. And also a town, obviously, that unfortunately suffered heavy damages and losses was the city of Irpin. And I'm very delighted to welcome the mayor of Irpin now to the stage. Please welcome Alexander Markushin, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mayor. Please take your seats. And as you can see, this is a spectacular panel that we have here, and there's much to talk about for obvious reasons. Once again, the session is titled United in Recovery Towards a Free and Prosperous Ukraine. But before we dive into the subject matter and dive into a discussion, Minister Schulze, I would like to kindly ask you to offer some preliminary remarks. The floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, 837 days, that is how long Ukraine has now been defending its freedom. And I would like to express my deepest respect to the people in Ukraine for their courage and determination to stand long in these difficult times. And my gratitude, because they are also defending the freedom of us all here in Europe. And during my visits to Ukraine, I have met many people. Each of them carries their own story with them and often a lot of hope and optimism. And I have met many of who want to do their part in rebuilding a free Ukraine, such as Yana Stepanenko, who lost both legs in a bomb attack on Kramatorsk. 2 years on, she has now run the Boston Marathon on her new artificial legs. Or Tatiana, who was forced to flee eastern Ukraine to the west of the country alone with her 3 children. She learned a new trade and to be able to feed herself and her family. To all of them, I wish to say, Germany stands firmly with Ukraine. We stand by you and are committed to advancing reconstruction. It is important to already start thinking about the future. Ukraine's desire for freedom and for resilience are its greatest asset in that process. And let me outline 3 pillars that I think are needed for reconstruction. First of all, support is required so that people's basic needs can be met despite the war. This includes medical services and infrastructure, which needs to be repaired or renewed. Germany supports, for example, efforts to protect the energy infrastructure against attacks and rebuild it where necessary. We are developing decentralized grids and renewable energies because that helps to increase energy security. And every power line we're repairing is also a connection with Europe. As we repair transmission lines, we are making sure that they are compatible with the European grid, and Ukraine is part of the European family. And secondly, social cohesion must be ensured. Local communities play a key role in strengthening social cohesion. They are the ones in charge of securing their basic needs. They coordinate and organize the repair of houses, streets, and schools. For their support, we initiate, together with our partners, the Coalition for Sustainable Municipalities. The coalition will make sure that communities have access to the funds they need and can rebuild their own administrative capacities. And that is why it is great to see that civil society and municipalities are extensively involved at the Ukraine Recovery Conference. The private sector and trade unions too are also very well represented today. The Recovery Forum, which we will open this afternoon, will provide a platform to link up of all these actors. Together with Julia Siridenko and my colleague Robert Habeck, I invite you all to join this opening. And thirdly, investments in the Ukraine economy is required. But what would the economy be without the people who keep it running? And that is why this afternoon we will be launching the Skill Alliance together with Ukraine and many others. The alliance is about targeted training initiatives in professions that Ukraine needed most now. A free and independent Ukraine needs doctors and psychologists, nurses, engineers, and electricians. And to this end, government, international organizations, and companies are working together in the alliance. The alliance is about 3 things: more skilled workers, closer networks, and a stronger focus on reconstruction. And here, it is especially important to put a focus on women. They are currently taking in many of the tasks that keep this country running. They fight tirelessly for reforms and for international support. And that is why I am committed to strengthen women's participation in reconstruction. And last but not least, small and medium-sized enterprises are the backbone of Ukraine's economy. And that is why this Ukraine Recovery Conference will be launching the SME Resilience Alliance. It will make it easier for small and medium-sized companies in Ukraine to access finance, for instance, via the Business Development Fund, which provides long-term support through affordable loans and advisory services similar to Germany's development bank, the KfW. Thanks to this fund, around 40,000 SMEs have been able to exist on the Ukrainian market since 2022. They secure jobs and keep the economy running, and the SME Resilience Alliance built on these achievements. to foster investments in a stable and economically prosperous future for Ukraine. And ladies and gentlemen, we are stronger together. Let us join forces to drive forward reconstruction. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to the German Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development, Svenja Schulze, for kicking off this session with such stark and unambiguous words. And once again, before we dive into the subject matter, I would also kindly like to ask the Ukrainian First Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Economic Development and Trade, Yulia Sviridenko, to offer her opening remarks. The floor is yours, Prime Minister.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, actually war changed everything, even the name of this conference. If there were no full-scale invasion in Ukraine, so it would be been 8 conference on the reforms. And we would discuss a very broad reforms agenda, but each bomb killed not only Ukrainians, and destroyed not only buildings. We also witnessing how this war destroyed our shared vision on modern state, what a social market economy is, what a climate-friendly industry and energy sector are. And 2 years ago at the conference in Lugano, this conference was renamed to the Conference of Recovery. And I think it's a good manifestation of our shared belief and enthusiasm that we won't give up. And just 2 examples, our macro-financial stability and restored maritime logistics are enough to understand that our build to rebuild our economy and develop our country does not disappear under shelling. Today and tomorrow, many examples of resilience will be showcased in the hall, how with your help we would rebuild bridges, sewing was carried out, children were protected in schools, water supply was preserved. But we understand that the reconstruction of Ukraine is already the largest project of 21st century, and the total cost of rebuilding would be not less than 500 billion over the next 10 years. But I would want also to pay attention to energy issue because I think it would be the main topic among these 2 days, and I will emphasize once again that Russia already destroyed half of our generation capacity. It's about 9 gigawatts. It's half of our installed capacity, and to understand the scale of this challenge, you may compare, for example, with Germany. So it would be enough to provide electricity to 11 million German citizens. So it's a huge challenge that we're facing, and in this area we have 4 priorities for this conference and in the short term. First, it's a rapid restoration where it's physically possible, and we critically need equipment from your decommissioned power plants and direct financial support. Second, we need political and technical decision to increase import of electricity up to 2.3 gigawatt. Second, the third, we need to plant up to 1 gigawatt of capacity this year and another 4 gigawatt over the next 2 years. European, especially German companies, are global tech leaders in this field, and we are signing the first contracts in this conference, but we also need export credit finance solution from your government and institution. And the fourth, we need to build a new energy system that will serve Ukraine and Europe for the next 50 years. And this requires commercial loans, this requires more active involvement of IFIs, DFIs, and export credit agency globally. And of course, to ensure reliable air defense for Ukraine, I would say it's a Geiber urgent task. We see that the direct development of economic recovery on the quality of air defense. Thanks to protection of our ports, we were able to increase the export volume, 13 million tons of cargo. It's almost pre-war level. So we understand that from economic perspective, recovery requires several things. First of all, is strengthen the macroeconomic foundation, and we're working closely with our partners to ensure and the macro-financial stability during the next few years up to 2027. Second, to accelerate economic recovery. This requires investment. That's why we're here discussing the possibility for the private sector. And the third one, strengthen the potential for growth. Reforms need to be completed by long-term investment and technology transfer commitments from partners. Talking about reforms, I just would give you the few words. So last week we presented a reform matrix. All measures we are implementing within partner assistance program. It includes 206 conditions and recommendations and 410 indicators that Ukraine will fulfill this year. I think that replacing the word reforms with the world recovery in this conference title means that we have acknowledged that all the reforms consolidated in the reform matrix are necessary but insufficient for faster economic growth. Analysis shows that reforms alone are not enough for economic growth. Not only factor that can drive long-term growth is investment. It's involvement of private sector. So that's why we're here. If Ukraine wants to have a chance to catch up with the EU countries in terms of GDP, we need investment or technology transfer of from 10 to 13 billion per year over the next 10 years. So this is a key answer for this conference and for my presence is here. We need investors now to come to Ukraine, not to wait until the war will be finished, because it's a prerequisite for the fast economic growth and for the upcoming victory. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the Ukrainian First Vice Prime Minister. Thank you for your remarks. And it's very clear from the makeup of this panel that so many stakeholders, so many international organizations, and of course, municipalities are represented here. So let's get them into our discussion. Achim Steiner, I would like to start with you. You are today here representing the United Nations on behalf of the United Nations. And of course, it is a very, very prominent, very relevant, very pertinent international organization in the context of the Ukrainian recovery process. Can you tell us briefly, what is the role of the UN in the reconstruction process? How do you engage?
Thank you very much, and let me also join others in thanking, through Svenja Schulze, the Minister, the German government for hosting this conference. Indeed, it is a series of conferences, and I know you have just spoken, Deputy Prime Minister, about the challenges of translating vision and aspiration into very practical and operational realities. Let me begin by first of all saying the United Nations has been a partner to Ukraine, is a deeply engaged and invested partner right now, and is firmly committed, and this is the Secretary General's message, to the future of Ukraine. As we speak today, 3,000 UN staff in 24 different agencies and programs are working in Ukraine. They are supporting the humanitarian response, they are supporting the early recovery and reconstruction work, and they are engaged in also the longer term and systems reforms, and some of them the Deputy Prime Minister spoke to just now. I think at this very moment, to answer your question, we are focused first of all on the priorities that the Ukrainian government has set for itself. Imagine having not only millions of refugees leave your country, but also having millions of people being internally displaced. Still 3.7 million people are inside Ukraine, disrupted. Their ability to begin to earn a living again, to find a roof over their head. We have the mayor of Irpin here. I remember standing in Irpin and seeing how after the initial bombardments and destruction of the housing areas around Irpin, people were trying to find a place to go back to. The ability to remove rubble, to remove unexploded ordnance, to deal with demining. All these are aspects that we are working together with Ukraine at the moment. But also, and you've heard time and again this morning, energy infrastructure. I had the United Nations Development Program. It was at the request of Ukraine that we sourced the first 2 auto-transformers worldwide and delivered them, because each one of them could reconnect 500,000 people to electricity. But it is always between early recovery, immediate response, and the longer-term investments in what you have also described, a more resilient energy infrastructure for the future. Let me also say many of our UN agencies in the UN country team are also working with local ministries, local government, and local business leaders. whether it is helping to bring children back to school, by being able to repair schools, by operating health centers, by reconnecting citizens to the social welfare and social safety nets of the Ukraine. The bottom line for our engagement today is to both respond to the humanitarian crisis, but also to invest and be very proactive in helping Ukraine to function as a state at national, at local level, in order to have an economy continue to sustain Ukrainians. We often forget that 99% of business in Ukraine are in fact micro, small and medium-scale enterprises. Helping them costs virtually nothing, but can make all the difference between them giving up and leaving or staying and rebuilding their business, earning a livelihood, creating jobs. So this is the spectrum of our engagement today, and in the last 2 years, we, with the support of many of you in this hall here, mobilized over $1 billion in investments through the United Nations. We hope that this year it will actually be $1 billion that we're able to mobilize in support of all these different areas for Ukrainians, for citizens, for the restarting of business, but also for the basic infrastructure that will allow you to sustain people in order to look to the future with hope and with dignity. And this remains our commitment. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed to Achim Steiner. Yes, please. For laying out the very firm commitment on the part of the UN and its various agencies in fostering the Ukrainian recovery process. Thank you so much for that. And we're jumping from the United Nations to yet another very important institution, namely the World Bank Group, of course. And Anja Birde, great to have you with us representing the World Bank Group here on this panel. Very early on, the World Bank Group mobilized support from different donors, especially supporting the government to maintain public services and to support the country's economic reforms. Could you elaborate a bit further on your institutions, on the World Bank's further plans to support Ukraine moving forward? Thank you.
Sure, thank you so much. And let me also add my gratitude and thanks to the government of Germany and to Minister Schulze for having us here and for hosting this very important conference. And also take this opportunity to really commend the government of Ukraine and the people of Ukraine for their resilience and bravery that we see each and every day. I'd like to, just like my colleague Achim, say Ukraine has been a really important client for the World Bank for so many years. And the World Bank has really remained very steadfast in its support to Ukraine before this terrible invasion by Russia, and of course also as Ukraine has now had to face the challenges of being at war. And since the day one of this war, the World Bank Group, which is the World Bank, IFC, and MIGA, combining public and private parts of the World Bank Group, has really come together to see what we can do to support. And I wanted to maybe just mention 3 ways that we have been working with Ukraine and we continue to work. And as you also asked, what comes next and how do we evolve? First and foremost, we discovered very early that one of the most important things to do when countries go into a crisis, a conflict, a war, is to make sure that services to its people can continue. So we put together with the government of Ukraine, a platform which we call Peace. And what it essentially does is provides budget support to the budget of Ukraine to maintain the essential services, whether it's teacher salaries, healthcare expenditures, government workers, internally displaced. Essentially, we started with 2 categories, and we have now ended up with over 10 categories of budget expenditures that we can provide support to. I want to really give a lot of credit to development partners who came on board and said this is a very useful vehicle. And through this operation and other operations since the war began, we've been able to mobilize $42 billion to Ukraine, of which we've dispersed about $38 billion. So very important to put together this platform that was able to channel World Bank funds, but also other development partners funds. The second is to invest in sectors. We've been seeing and hearing today the importance of the energy sector, but also transport sector. For us in the World Bank, what has been very important are the human development sectors. So again, health, education, and social safety nets. It's been very important to be able to work there. but also SMEs, something we also heard about today, how important it is, particularly for jobs and for growth. And the third area that we have kept a strong focus on is diagnostics. So together with the UN and the European Commission, and of course the government of Ukraine, we have published a series of damage and needs assessments. The last one came out in February, and that was the third one of its kind. And that was also referenced by the Chancellor, that puts the damage at $486 billion. That's the latest figure that we have. Others have been economic updates, very regularly coming out with an update on the economy and where we see the outlook for the economy. And the third most recent is a household survey that takes stock of the level of poverty in Ukraine. And this is something perhaps I want to draw attention to today, which is that we have seen 1.8 million additional people fall into poverty in Ukraine because of this war. And that makes 9 million poor people in Ukraine today, a very significant number. But I also want to emphasize that we estimate that about 3 million have avoided poverty thanks to international support and mobilization. Maybe just very quickly what we do next, because we're constantly having to evolve. We are looking to continue to support reforms, and we really were very happy to see the reform matrix that the government of Ukraine has released. And as many others have said, to be reforming in the midst of a war is no small deed. The second thing is to work on project preparation facility, and we also heard today about identifying bankable projects, prioritizing projects for the future. And last week, we also signed an MOU between the World Bank, IFC, government of Ukraine on housing finance. So it's very important to also continuously evolve and make sure that we're stepping up in areas that need support.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anna Viade, and for laying out the very steadfast support on the part of the World Bank Group for Ukraine in many sectors. I will revert to you, of course, in the second round. Thank you so much. Let me move, however, on to Odile Renaud-Bassot. Great to have you with us, the President of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And from the beginning of the war, the EBRD's priority has been to keep the economy and the infrastructure in Ukraine running. What are some of your supports? What are some of the EBRD's priorities now to support Ukraine's economy today, particularly if we are looking at the severely damaged energy sector and municipalities?
So I would like to start also by thanking the German government for their hospitality and this very important conference, because I think it's really important to discuss, to exchange views, to exchange experience, and I think to build and to agree on priorities. So indeed, we've been very committed since the beginning of the war to continue our support to Ukraine for EBRD, which was created after the collapse of the Soviet Union to develop post-Soviet countries. This was, at the core of our history, at the core of our mandate. And as you mentioned, we focused on real economy because we are mainly a bank investing in the private sector. So, of course, military support is very important, budget support is very important, but it's also very important to keep the economy going, because at the end of the day, it's also generate taxes, create jobs, it's what allows people to stay in the country and continuing to support the military efforts. So we increased our investment in the war situation. We doubled what we invest each year. We invested up to now more than 4.2 billion, 4.3 billion euros, and in half of that last year was in the private sector, and half of that in the public sector to support key infrastructure. And we are going to sign in the margin of this conference commitment for new 1 billion. So. Very important. And as I was saying, two key big priorities: keeping the infrastructure functioning. So we invested a lot already in electricity, in energy. Overall, our investment in this sector up to now has been 1.5 billion with different companies in the public sector, but also supporting private businesses through banks or directly. And what is very striking, I think, and the sign of the resilience is that business continues and investments, new investments are taking place, mostly from companies already in Ukraine who know the country and so forth, but they are deploying, developing new investments, relocating, and increasing their capacity and so forth, and we are trying to provide support for all of that. Energy remains a key challenge, and I think it has stepped up, and what we are doing is, as Anna was saying, we need to change and we need to adjust to what happens. Agility is, I think, one of the key issues. And what we are focusing now is how to focus more on distributed energy capacity, generation capacity. Last year, the challenge was more the distribution network. Now it's the generation capacity, and we have already heard a lot about that. And we signed last week with the Prime Minister an MOU on the 300 million financing for state-owned companies in order to support this generation distributed capacity. And what we want to do and we are working on, is to really use all the tools we have with our private sector clients, with financial institutions, and with the public sector to develop capacities. Municipalities will be a very important element in that respect, because a lot can be done in relation also with the heating system in a very distributed manner, which will be more, the more you are distributed, the more you are protected against a Russian attack. And we already have a strong commitment with municipalities, around 1 billion of existing investment, and we are announcing a new package of 143 million, working with Lutz district, for example, on district heating, and other municipalities, either on water management, but also liquidity support for municipalities to help them, and it's the case with Lviv, Mykolaiv, hopefully Kharkiv, to help them to do the investments that are needed to face the current circumstances.
Yeah, thank you so much to Odile Renaud, so the president of the EBRD, for sharing the EBRD's efforts and keeping the Ukrainian infrastructure and economy running, particularly with a focus on municipalities, which brings me to, of course, the two mayors that we have here on stage. Thank you so much to both joining. Alexander Markushin, I would like to start with you. It goes without saying that much of the city was damaged. And the question I have is, how's the situation today in Irpin?
Да, доброго дня. Я дуже дякую перше організаторам за цю вкрай важливу конференцію для України.
I too would like to thank the organizers of this important conference for hosting this conference. As far as Irpin is concerned, we are a leading city these days, leading as concerns construction and recovery. This is something we owe to Ukraine's efforts and the efforts of our international partner organizations. Over the last 2 years, we have carried out more than 200 successful projects. Thanks to the support from our government and thanks to the financial support from the civil-military administration of Kyiv, and thanks to the support from our partners all over the world. Let me give you a few examples. It's more than examples. We are talking fundamental principles here that allow us to do this job. In February 2020, Russia tried to reach Kyiv, and they crossed through Irpin. Irpin is the city most damaged in that part of the country. It is where kindergarten, schools, the critical infrastructure had been totally demolished and destroyed. We had no water, no gas, no electricity. We had no mobile links, no radio links. But the very first who came in to help us were the ICRC, the International Red Cross. Within 19 days, we were able to restore the water supply from Kyiv to Irpin. And Caritas and Red Cross was there, UNICEF were there too quickly. Over the period of 1.5 months, we succeeded in tackling the issue of water supply, wastewater treatment, got the gas and electricity running again, and the city was revived. We've received strong support from the GIZ and from Ukraine.
під час обстрілів.
They provided us with the first diesel generators and also the technology that we needed, which provided us with the opportunity to immediately begin the reconstruction process. What is the situation like today? We have a program of 7.5 billion euros for the reconstruction of the infrastructure. We're talking water lines here, about heating systems. And I would like to use this opportunity to thank the development program of the United Nations, UNDP, which helped us rebuild private houses. 150 houses were taken down, and the same happened to multi-story buildings, but we're still very busy in that regard. Much needs to be done. The Japanese company has provided technological equipment that allows us to take down these demolished houses. The International Organization for Migration, IOM, has also chipped in, and so does a bank from Germany, building up 3 multi-story buildings from scrap. The World Bank, too, is helping us. Our biggest hospital is being rebuilt with the help of the World Bank, and I would like to thank them most warmly. UNICEF has rebuilt the biggest secondary school. It was the biggest school on this globe. They invested 5 million euro, allowing children to attend school again, and another secondary school was also rebuilt. A kindergarten was rebuilt. 200 children are now able to attend this kindergarten. So these are but a few examples of the reconstruction that is ongoing. But I'm only, mentioning a small share of what is being done. If I may point out to the important principles I referred to, as I said, there are a number of important principles with regard to reconstruction. We have to be quick. The quality has to be high. And third, and that's the most important point, we have to be transparent. The process has to be transparent. Our partners are providing us with the necessary funding, and they want to know where the funds go. And we have tried to act in a way that allows our partners, our donors, to organize the bidding procedures, the tenders, so they themselves identify who should be responsible in situ to realize these projects. So there is zero risk involved for our partners. And I could give you many other examples. 90% of the reconstruction took place at the expense of our partners. We've organized everything. We drafted project plans. We prepared the necessary papers, the technical specifications. But it was the partners who shaped the process. Every individual little stone is important for us. What we continue to offer to our partners is to proceed in this way, to continue to pursue this approach. We identify projects, and they define and design the work that is to be done. In that way, we ensure the transparency that people rightly expect of us. The same goes for the United States. They've done so much to help us, but much more needs to be done. And I would like to use this opportunity to express my gratitude to our partners for this great support we've received.
To the Mayor of Irpin, Alexandra Markushin, also for pointing out the many goods that the institutions that are represented here on this panel are doing, that the impact that it's having on the ground. That must be very gratifying for each and every one of you to hear, and of course is motivation to keep the support up. Thank you so much. And I was also, while asking how the situation is on the ground, I was also looking at the mayor of Kharkiv, of course, Ihor Terekov, because the situation, of course, you're sharing the suffering, you're sharing the pain, you're sharing the trepidation on a daily basis. As the second largest Ukrainian city, Kharkiv, it's great to have you with us, Ihor. And aside from the question, how the situation is in Kharkiv, I also want to ask you about the master plans play for reconstruction, which I believe you have presented yesterday here in Berlin. Tell us how the situation is on the ground, and what role does the development of the master plan plays for reconstruction? Very much looking forward to your reply.
Доброго дня. Перш за все, я дуже вдячний уряду Німеччини за організацію цього заходу.
Thank you. Allow me to express my gratitude to the federal government for hosting this conference. And I would like to thank the Ukrainian government for supporting my city. Yes, indeed, this has been tremendously important for us to see all parties interact and helping us in keeping up the resistance. Now, as far as the situation in the city is concerned, it is as follows. We're in a war, and it is a brutal war. Of course, we're here to talk about recovery and reconstruction. Yes, of course, we need investment in that area. And of course, we have to put all our efforts and strength into ensuring that Ukraine is being rebuilt and can recover so as to allow it to become a stronger European country. However, we are at war. People are dying on a daily basis. Every day, in Kharkiv, people lose their lives. Yesterday, too, was no exception. We'd already arrived in Germany, and we felt safe and secure, whilst our city was under attack at the same time. We have had fatalities. We've got people who were wounded and houses that were affected, destroyed. According to the latest statistics published in May, we have had 76 such attacks from the air via Russia. 193 alarms were sounded in the city. Just imagine what this means. 20 times 24 hours of alarm. But regardless of these facts, Kharkiv is not giving in. Kharkiv continues to run, continues to work. Kharkiv is alive. Despite these facts that I've just described, our children attend school. Not because life is so beautiful. They have to go and attend their classes underground in a bunker, in a shelter. We are trying to set up schools in the underground in order to provide children with the opportunity to learn. So this is not about a beautiful life that people are leading, but it's not nice for them to enter the underground when the alarm is being sounded. But again, this is an affirmation of what our president said earlier today. We need the most modern air defense conceivable, the most modern air defense conceivable, so as to allow the people to continue to live and to continue to live their lives. We're talking the lives of our people, about our children and about our women. The most important thing about this conference is that we address the issue of providing security for our people, despite the fact that the country is at war. We are aware of the fact that the winter will come. The next winter is almost on our doorstep, and our enemy has smashed our energy supply. All heating power plants have been destroyed. All of them. We have 0 kilowatt being generated in that way. No, 0 kilowatt of electricity. And this is why the government took the decision that we need a decentralization of our energy economy. We need a decentralization of our energy supply. We need your support here. We need the support of our partners in that regard. We need the support of the international organizations such as the World Bank, such as the EBRD. This is of vital importance for us. We're talking the lives of people here. We get like 20 degrees Celsius during winter. And without a heating system that works, without electricity, without water supply, people will not survive. They will not be able to survive under these circumstances. You have to be aware of that. We've drafted a roadmap. We worked on this roadmap with our government. Costs incurred by the government, costs incurred by the municipalities and the regional administrations. This, as I said, is a matter of survival for us. But as I said, Kharkiv is still alive. It continues to live. It assists our troops and soldiers. Our industry continues to be up and running, and I would like to thank you for your contribution. We have taken certain measures in cooperation with the federal government. We've abolished local taxation for the time being so as to allow our enterprises to have more income. And we will do whatever we can to ensure that the companies remain in Kharkiv and are able to continue their operations and to create jobs. Yesterday, I spoke with the representative of the foundation of Sir Norman Foster, a project that receives the support of the German government. We spoke about this when we met at the conference, Ukraine Recovery Conference in London. We drafted a step-by-step, a general plan that identifies the individual steps for our plan, for our future, the future of our city. The plan covers a period of 50 to 100 years. We're talking architecture here, reconstruction, creating an industrial park, business areas, areas marked for business operations, and areas into which investment is to go. Even whilst we're at war, we need to make these plans, and we plan to present them to the investors so that they can take a look at these plans and take the time to familiarize themselves with these plans, and for them to take the necessary decisions so as to see what they can do. We guarantee transparency and provide them with the opportunity to invest in Kharkiv, a heroic city. Thank you for your attention. Long live Ukraine.
Thank you so much, Mayor Terekov, for speaking so bluntly, so passionately about the situation there on the ground and what still needs to be done in order to move those communities forward. And as you can see, we don't have much time, but I want to get every one of you in here one more time. So I would kindly ask you to be as brief as possible so that we can wrap up somewhat in time, because Achim Steiner, we talked, the mayor talked, Mayor Terekov talked about the plan that they've laid out and about reaching and supporting the communities. Describe quickly the UN's contribution in this context.
Well, it goes across so many areas, but I maybe want to pick up on this desperation of the moment. You described it both very well. Things are destroyed, people are lost, they have lost their relatives. I remember in Irpin standing on the ruins of a family's home that was at that moment simply a matter of removing the rubble and making sure there are no landmines and unexploded ordnance. It was the home of a family of musicians, 3 generations. And the daughter came armed with a violin for our visit. Why do I want to share this example with you? Because to me, it speaks to this extraordinary spirit that when we talk about early recovery, reconstruction, sometimes it simply begins with the fact people care about what happened to you. They are ready to stand by you. You begin to have hope again. You begin to have courage again to think about what happens next. And I think this is what is so crucial. We then listen to many of the examples where across the UN spectrum, and you heard some of our agencies, funds and programs being quoted, we are there to help in an unconventional way, in a fast way, high quality way. And I think when I look to how a central government has to, in a sense, have an overall reconstruction early recovery plan, but in the midst of a war, it is mayors as local leaders who are such inspirations also. I saw it also in Lviv, and this was another encounter I had where job creation was integral to a major hospital complex that now has to deal with literally thousands of people who are amputees. Young men, women and children, victims of war, their whole life rewritten. How do you combine a response to help them with also creating opportunities to make prosthetics and use local enterprise rather than importing them? I think this is the reality that you as mayors every day right now are anchors for, and we as partners have to be unconventional, fast and committed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The UN, obviously a big player in the recovery and reconstruction process in Ukraine. We thank you for that, and we'll continue and monitor, of course, the situation as it develops. Odile Renaud-Bassot, also very quickly want to bring you in one more time, because you have been, the EBRD has been very steadfast and integral in reforming the public sector and state-owned enterprises in order to make them more attractive for private investments. Tell us about your priorities right now, moving forward, also perhaps in the context of Ukraine's Europe and EU aspirations.
Very quickly, first of all, I want to pay tribute about the work done by the government on the state-owned enterprise reform. It has been passed very recently. Yulia Svirenko was at the core of the discussion. 8 years of work to get this law passed. And in a country in a war, being able to do such a reform, I think, is amazing and show once again the determination and the resilience. It also shows the very good cooperation between all IFIs, because it was with the support of the World Bank, OECD, IMF, and so forth, everybody joining forces in order to have this law. Continued reform of SOE, state-owned enterprise, quality of the governance, state ownership policies. This is very important because we see in a war situation how important these companies and their good management is in order to be able to to deliver the key infrastructures that are so important for the country to be able to remain on its feet and to continue the fight. The second key priority for us will remain fight against corruption and improve, all the procurement processes and so forth. We've heard a lot about that. The mayor also mentioned that. But transparency, we work a lot with the Agency for Reconstruction on a plan, procurement training, and so forth, so as to ensure that the money we invest is well invested, and that's key for the credibility, the sustainability of the external support. And now, I think one additional, we talked about a lot of energy. Human capital is a key challenge moving ahead, because young people are mobilized, veterans are coming back with challenges. It's a challenge to reintegrate them in the workforce, so we are working on that. Skilling for women, retraining for people coming back from the war, and so forth. This will be a key priority for us moving forward.
Thank you so much indeed. And Anja Bjerde, I would also like to ask you one more time. We've been talking about the rapid damage and needs assessment, which your World Bank, obviously in very close cooperation with the Ukrainian government, the UN and the EU, has been working on and preparing. And you've identified almost $500 billion in needs as of last year's. Obviously, a conference like this is best suited and very well situated to ask you how Ukraine's partners can begin addressing these needs. $500 billion is a big amount. Would very much like to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. And maybe because there's been so much emphasis on the private sector, I'll just focus a few observations on how we see the private sector play into this. So of the 486 billion, which is a 10-year reconstruction needs assessment, we actually believe up to about a third could be mobilized and met by the private sector under the right circumstances in terms of business environment, which has to do with Ukraine's continued focus on reforms. Secondly, continuing to think creatively about finance, and here we have seen a big response by using what we call blended finance, so bringing in some soft concessionary finance together with commercial finance. And thirdly, what I think has been very helpful is when countries help international companies go in by backing with guarantees. And I really want to acknowledge what Germany's done in this regard, because this is exactly what helps international companies that were present in Ukraine before the war come in and bring new money to Ukraine by having these guarantees. The one thing I want to call attention to today is the role of human capital. What we hear from companies, whether they're domestic or international, is that Ukraine has a huge endowment when it comes to human capital, but it needs to continue to be invested in terms of training, skills, equipment. And I'm very happy to launch that we will actually be looking to put in place a human capital accelerator, if you will, to be able to put even more training and support to young people in Ukraine, to people coming back to Ukraine, and also the very important point on female labor force participation.
No, thank you. I think that deserves a round of applause indeed. Thank you, Anna Bieda, also for pointing out the very crucial role of the private sector in this context. Mayor Markushin, let me also turn one final time to you. Of course, we know that due to the ramifications and consequences of the war, there is a shortage of skilled workers in Ukraine, but your city in particular. Very briefly, how are you dealing with the shortage of skilled workers?
Да, це велика проблема. На сьогодні не тільки в Ірпіні, а і в Україні нестача робочих рук, бо дуже багато хлопців пішли.
Well, there is a shortage of skilled workers, of course. A lot of young men went to war to defend the country, and now we're doing what we can to involve the young men and the veterans. We're giving them work, we're helping our women to learn new trades, to retrain, especially in jobs where mainly men worked before the war. Now, we're working on a project together with the EU, and we will train highly skilled workers. It is true, highly qualified workers are a real problem. We have a brain drain. A lot emigrated, left Ukraine, or they joined the war, they went to the front. And we hope to train and upskill people in our communities. Now, I'd like to tell you a bit about the situation on the front line. When I started my trip to this conference, the customs officials in Germany asked me, "Oh, you're going to the Ukraine Recovery Conference? Shouldn't one first win the war and push out the enemy before starting reconstruction?" I said, no. A lot of people fled the country to Germany. If they come back, they have to live somewhere. They have to find a job. Kids in Ukraine need schools, just like German kids. They need to go to school. We need to rebuild Ukraine. Over the last 80 years, Ukraine has been fighting the biggest war in Europe. Russian terrorists are destroying our schools, our hospitals, our kindergarten. The terrorists are killing women, elderly people, and children. So we have to do what we can to succeed in this war. Live Ukraine.
I think you gave the best response to the customs official, something that customs officer, and it's been reiterated many, many times, the recovery process cannot start or cannot wait until the war is over. It has to start now, and the Ukraine Recovery Conference is obviously a very, very important element in that. I want to also bring Mayor Terekov in one more time. We are surrounded here on this panel by institutions who are helping Ukraine keep the economy running. How is the URC, how is the Ukraine Recovery Conference helping in keeping the economy running in Kharkiv and the institutions that are represented here on this very stage, Mayor?
Перш за все, я теж підтримую цю тезу, що сказав мій колега, що сказала.
Well, as my colleague said, I can only agree with what he said and also with what Yulia Sviridenko said. We cannot wait. People need reconstruction as quickly as possible. On the one hand, a lot of people lost their homes, their houses. They have no roof over their head. And when we talk about Kharkiv, 150,000 people in the city of Kharkiv have lost their homes. So they have no home. Their homes have been destroyed. And this is really a key point. Then there's something else. When we look at housing, there is, of course, also the emotional component. People see that reconstruction is underway, that houses are being built, that people are going to work. That is a motivation for people. It is emotional support. People want to lead a normal life. They want to work. Despite what is happening in our Kharkiv, we are engaging in reconstruction. We are using our own funds and resources. We are using funds from the Ukrainian government, and we're being supported by international partners. A lot of foundations are supporting us, and organizations like the UN, UNICEF are actively working together with us. They're all there, and they're not differentiating because of religions or faith. We would like to do as much reconstruction as quickly as possible, but of course things take time. Now, to come back to air defense, we had several cases where we rebuilt objects and a new missile destroyed the objects, and we had to rebuild them again. So we need to continue to do that. And I'm very grateful for the support we're getting from international organizations and foundations. Thank you for supporting reconstruction.
From the get-go. So I would kindly bring just for a couple of minutes Minister Schulze and obviously Minister Syrydenko, just a couple of minutes. We are here at the Ukraine Recovery Conference. Your government has been rightfully praised for this initiative. What are your hopes? What do you hope to come away with after these 2 days?
I hope that we can help to manage the complexity, because seeing that everything needs to be delivered at the same time everywhere. On the local level, we see that there are differences, that there are different needs in Irpin and in Kharkiv. And dealing with that is meaning that you need agility and that you need to bring that in the right balance. And with these Berlin dimensions, so that we talk about the human factor, about business and private sector, about the municipalities and their role, and about the way to the EU. I hope that that helps to bring this agility in the right ways to rebuild Ukraine, and seeing how important the local level is. I think this panel showed that again. We need to keep in mind the local dimension, and building this coalition for sustainable municipalities here on this conference, I think that is an important topic, because they need at the end to deliver, they need to manage that, and we all need to help to rebuild, and together we are stronger. That is what we can take away also here.
Together we are stronger indeed, and thanks to you and your government's efforts in making that happen. Minister Syrydenko, you're going to get the last 60 seconds also to reiterate and answer the question about your hopes and expectations of this conference.
I think that this panel actually reminds once again that the biggest and the most valuable resources in our country are our people. And with this conference, we want to use the deliveries for this conference to start the reconstruction, because we need, first of all, to provide the proper livelihood conditions for those who are staying within the country. And also we need to show the very clear signal for Ukrainians living abroad that we are creating incentives for them to return back home. So that's why we're not able to wait until the war will be finished. We need to make a reconstruction now. I agree absolutely with Igor Terechov that we need, like the President today in his speech emphasized several times, we need anti-missile system, we need air defense systems. And if you would ask what can bring the boost of economic growth, I would say air defense system that can protect industrial zones, that can protect cities, that can protect our citizens. And why it's so important to keep working working, keep fighting, and thinking about investment, because the war is lasting, and it means that just based on the allocation within the country, we can finance this war. All macro-financial aid goes for covering the social expenditure. All taxes, revenues that we allocate within the country can be spent for the war issues. That's why we keep fighting, not only for our own territory, but we keep fighting for the common values, for democracy. So that's why I think it's a right time for foreign investors to look deeply at the country with, as I said, very valuable resources, people, human resources, and to open the opportunity for themselves and to invest right now.
Yeah, thank you so much. Clearly, your message, I think, has been heard loud and clear here in this room. Ladies and gentlemen, united in recovery towards a free and prosperous Ukraine. I think this panel has done a marvelous job in laying out what has already been established, contributed, and achieved. But of course, much more importantly, what still remains to be done, which is not insignificant considering your valuable statements. Thank you so much to our valuable panelists. This is your applause. Much appreciated.